All right, Psalm 46. You have yet another gigantic Pastor Tim handout chart thing today. So just set aside that. Don't try to look at this now. We'll get to that later. Just take the simple handout. And what I'd encourage you to do with the simple handout that has all the space on it, as we go through 46, 47, 48, just get down for yourself the really key phrases. Write down the key phrases, maybe a note or two about them, to kind of help you remember what's in which psalm, what are the big ideas in each of these psalms, and then we'll get to the ginormous chart later on. Okay, on the screen is a list of words from Psalms 46 through 48. Strength, help, exalted, righteous, just, faithful, eternal. Those are words that, don't give me that second list quite yet, sorry. Those are words that all describe God. These are things that are true about God in these psalms. But these are words that are somewhat abstract, and I just mean by that, they're a little hard to picture. Like when those words go up on the screen, do you immediately picture tangible things? Now watch this. Here's another list of terms from Psalms 46 through 48. City, river, fortress, dawn, mountains, spears, shields, towers. Now do you see things? You picture things right away when you get that list of words? So the heading on your handout says in the introduction, Psalms that you can see. Because this first list here contains things that are true about God, but God himself gives us lots of ways to try to see those things. This list over here is all God's illustrations. He's like, think of it like this, picture it like this, see this, to help us grasp who he is and what he's done. So these are psalms that you can see. These are vivid, fun psalms packed with illustrations of really the most important truths in the world. These are epic psalms covering the whole scope of salvation history, from the garden to the cross and all the way to the New Jerusalem. And even this morning I've been like, oh Lord, are we doing too much today? But I can't help the fact that these psalms are so big. We joke as pastors that how often we get ourselves into these messes where we feel like we're trying to preach the whole Bible in a sermon. But that's because the Bible's so interconnected. It's just astonishing. So here we go again. That's why you get ginormous charts for me. Okay, so let's jump in to Psalm 46. Let me just talk you through this 3 psalms briefly. And as we go, it'll probably feel a little bit overwhelming, like can't keep up with it all. And then hopefully we'll put it together later. Let's just see what's here, though. Psalm 46, to the choir master of the sons of Korah, according to Alamoth, guesses about what that means, but nobody knows for sure, a song. Verse 1, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. So he's refuge, like external protection. He's strength, like inside provision, and always available, always enough for us. Verse 2, therefore, because God is like that, we will not fear, though the earth gives way, though the mountains be moved into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble at its swelling. Selah. Some of you remember years ago, and I don't remember if this is 15 years ago or what, but do you remember when no fear was like the thing? Like no fear stickers and everything everywhere, sweatshirts and all that. These are no fear verses. Because what is described here in Psalm 46, 2 and 3 is that God's people can have no fear even if the worst happens. Like what's the very worst that could happen? What's described here is global catastrophe. And God's people say, that's okay, no fear. Even if, yesterday there was a headline, Geoffrey Hinton, some people call him like the godfather of AI, made headlines this week talking about how easy AI makes it for just an individual to design the kind of biochemical weapon that could cause mass death. Cool. And that's just hypothetical, but if you want something real, how about this Sunday in Kyiv, Ukraine, where our brothers and sisters experienced the most missiles and drones from Russia in the entire war on this Lord's Day. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore, no fear, even if the whole thing blows apart. Then, verse 4 helps us picture that with a calm, joyful, safe city in the midst of all that chaos. Verse 4, there is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy habitation of the Most High. God is in the midst of her, the city. She shall not be moved. God will help her when morning dawns. So what you're supposed to see there is a peaceful city in the midst of a world falling apart. The mountains are falling into the sea. The seas are overwhelming the mountains. The whole thing's shaking apart. And here's this happy city. And the city has a river. Rivers were essential for an ancient city to survive being besieged. But so much more than that. In the Psalms so far, all the way back to Psalm 1, rivers have been illustrations of delight and refreshment and spiritual nourishment. So the city has a river. But the city's got more than a river. The city has God. This is the city of God, not just because he owns it or something, but because it is, verse 4, the holy habitation of the Most High. By the way, have we seen any mention of God's house in the Psalms so far? It just keeps coming up over and over again. Here we have it again. The holy habitation of the Most High. This city is where God lives. No wonder it's happy. Verse 5, God is in the midst of her. That's why it's untouchable. Every morning, God is there to help her. So this is the first time in the Psalms that we have this city. We've had God's house lots of times, but it's the first time we have this city. But it's not the last. There are going to be a number of different Psalms. They're often called the Songs of Zion that are about God's city. And we've got the first two of them today, Psalms 46 and 48. And this city is referred to with words like Zion, the mountain, the hill, the city, Mount Zion, all refer to the same place. Verse 6, the nations rage. All right, we know that, Psalm 2. The nations rage against God and his rule. But then verse 6 says, the kingdoms totter. Okay, wait, what's happening here? He utters his voice. That's got to be God, right? God utters his voice. The earth melts. So you've got raging nations, and then it sounds like God is taking down the raging nations and even the earth itself. But verse 7, the Lord of hosts is with us. The Lord of armies is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Selah. So God's people in God's city have God's peace even when the earth is falling apart and the kingdoms of the earth are tottering. Verse 8, come, behold the works of the Lord, how he has brought desolations on the earth. See how God lays waste the earth. Verse 9, he makes wars cease to the end of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the chariots with fire. That is really fascinating. Verse 8, you've got God's judgment, but he uses his judgment, verse 9, to end war. God comes against the nations. He brings desolation, but as a result, the nations stop fighting. Verse 10, be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. I'm saying it like that because there is a very legitimate devotional way in which, as Christians, we love that verse and we say, be still and know that I'm God, right? But in context, this is much more like when Jesus says to the storm, peace, be still. This is God saying to the raging nations and the chaos, stop, surrender. I'm God. I'm going to be exalted. He will be exalted among the nations. He will be exalted in the earth. Somehow, out of the chaos comes global exaltation of God. Meanwhile, God's people are safe in God's city. Verse 11, the Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Selah. God himself is the fortress. It's kind of like he is the city in one sense. He's with his people, and that means that they too can be still, knowing that he is God. Okay, we got more to say about what that psalm means, but for now let's just say the heading there, I didn't give you that, did I? Sorry. Psalm 46, God and the unshakable city. God and the unshakable city. By the way, this seems to have been Martin Luther's favorite psalm. This is the psalm that was the starting point for the hymn, A Mighty Fortress is Our God. And Spurgeon reported that when life would get chaotic for Martin Luther, he would say to his friend Philip Melanchthon, "Come, Philip, let's sing the 46th Psalm." It was his song to get his heart calmed down when life was chaos. Let's keep going, because Psalms 46 through 48, they're a package that go together. So Psalm 47, I'll give you the heading this time, sorry. Psalm 47, global songs to a global king. Global songs to a global king. To the choir master, a psalm of the sons of Korah. Clap your hands, all peoples. Shout to God with loud songs of joy. Well, that's really interesting, because Psalm 47 had global destruction, but also a hint of global exaltation. And now, first verse of Psalm 46. Now, first verse of Psalm 47, all peoples are called to clap their hands. And this is talking about celebrating the king, welcoming the king, rejoicing in the king. Shout and sing to him. Verse 2, for the Lord, the Most High, is to be feared, a great king over all the earth. So the clapping and the shouting and the singing comes out of awe. God is king. I got to worship him. I got to celebrate him. Now the people of Israel speak, verse 3. He subdued peoples under us and nations under our feet. He chose our heritage for us, the pride of Jacob, whom he loves. Selah. So that's what God did for Israel. He led them in victory over the nations, and then he gave them their land. That's what verse 4 is talking about, the heritage and the pride of Jacob. Those are references to the land that God gave to Israel. Why do the nations need to know that? We'll come back to this later, but I would say that what God did with Israel, choosing this nation, making them victorious, was a template for what God was going to do later, to call out a people from every tribe and tongue and nation. So we'll come back to that. Verse 5. This is the central verse in the psalm, and probably the most important line in the psalm. God has gone up with a shout, the Lord with the sound of a trumpet. So this is the language of a king ascending up to his throne. Or like a king who's gone down to fight battles, and now he comes back, and he's coming back up to his throne, and people are shouting, and trumpets are sounding. There's this big celebration as the king comes back to his throne victorious. So verse 5 is kind of a riddle. What's it talking about? When is it talking about? When did God go up? And we'll come back and talk about that more a little bit later, but it's probably not a surprise to us to learn that Psalm 47 is a psalm that has traditionally been used among Christians to celebrate the ascension of Jesus, the return of Jesus to heaven to be seated at the right hand of the throne of God. So this is the most famous ascension psalm. In verse 6, in verse 5, the fact that it refers to a shout and the sound of a trumpet and this excitement, together with verse 1, clap your hands, all peoples, suggests that everybody's, even the nations are excited about this. Whatever it means that God has gone up. You got even the nations that are celebrating God going up. Verse 6. So here's what they should do. Sing. Sing praises to God. Sing praises. Sing praises to our King. Sing praises. What do you think they should do? Probably sing, huh? For God is the King of all the earth. That's why you should sing praises with a psalm. That's one way to translate that. Maybe with understanding or something. Sing, 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 sing. I think 6 times in the psalm. But don't miss verse 7. For God is the King. That's why you sing. You're celebrating the King who reigns over the nations. Okay, now here comes another surprise, maybe another riddle. Verse 8, God reigns over the nations. God sits on his holy throne. The princes of the peoples. Okay, so that would be the rulers of the nations. The rulers of the nations gather as the people of the God of Abraham. What does that mean? In Hebrew, it's looks kind of like it just says it like literally without a connecting word. It just says the leaders of the nations gather the people of the God of Abraham. So does it mean that the leaders of the world nations gather, ESV, as the people of the God of Abraham? Does it mean that they gather with the people of the God of Abraham? It's another riddle, but it sure sounds like you've got Jews and Gentiles, including Gentile rulers, all submitting to God the King and rejoicing in God as the King and singing to him. And verse 9 ends, for the shields of the earth belong to God. Some people think that's a reference to the rulers. He is highly exalted. All right, that's Psalm 47. There are lots of riddles in that psalm. But the heading we gave to it was Global Songs to a Global King. We'll try to get some clarity about the riddles in a minute. For now, you doing okay? Are we still alive? We're working hard. Here comes Psalm 48. All right, here's the heading. God's city cannot be overthrown. God's praise cannot be contained. God's city cannot be overthrown. God's praise cannot be contained. Psalm 48, a song, a psalm of the sons of Korah. Great is the Lord, and greatly to be praised in the city of our God. So we're back to the city now, and the city is a place of worship for the great God. And then in the middle of verse 1, it's described as his holy mountain. Well, of course, if God is there, it's got to be a holy city, holy mountain where that city is. Verse 2, beautiful in elevation, the joy is the joy of all the earth. Mount Zion in the far north, the city of the great King. So the words Mount Zion there, that's what that tells us that we're talking about Jerusalem. Mount Zion in the Old Testament is the location of the city of Jerusalem. So that's what we're talking about here. And yet, again, it's kind of like a riddle because Jerusalem is described there in verse 2 with grander terms than anything we've ever seen for Jerusalem, earthly Jerusalem. So it's described there as the joy of all the earth. So we'll come back to some of that later. Verse 3, within her citadels, God has made himself known as a fortress. So this city is so strong because God is there. God's the fortress of this city. Now watch this, verse 4. For behold, the kings assembled. Okay, we've had the nations and the rulers of the nations already in 46 and 47, right? So now what happens here in 48? For behold, the kings assembled, they came on together. That's the wording of an attack. Verse 5. As soon as they saw it, what's it? Probably the city. The kings assemble, they're going to attack God's city. As soon as they saw it, they were astounded. They were in panic. They ran. They took to flight. They ran away. Trembling took hold of them there. Anguish as of a woman in labor. By the east wind, you shattered the ships of Tarshish. So God blows them away like a hurricane, wiping out the big merchant ships on the Mediterranean. So whatever they see, when they try to attack God's city, it terrifies them. They panic, they run, and it's like hurricane blows them away, and they are smashed. Verse 8. As we have heard, so we have seen in the city of the Lord of hosts, in the city of our God, which God will establish forever. Selah. What does that mean? As we have heard, so we have seen in the city. It might just mean that the writers of the psalm are saying, we've heard about God doing great things, like to defend Jerusalem, but now we've seen it ourselves. It could mean that. But I think it probably means more than that. I think it probably means like everything we've heard about God and how amazing he is, we see it all summed up in this city. Somehow this city is the place where everything we've heard about God is put on grand display. And in a minute, we're going to get more pieces of that. Verse 9. We have thought on your steadfast love, O God, in the midst of your temple. So the temple's in the city because God dwells there, right? So the people in this wonderful city, they're going to the temple, and in the temple, they're thinking. They're meditating. Wow, God is here. God is with us. God is taking care of us. God is blessing us. There's this river that makes glad the city of God. God is the fortress. When morning dawns, God is with us every time. And all of those thoughts lead them to the conclusion that God must what? What is it there? That God must we have thought on your steadfast love, O God, in the midst of your temple. So as they sit there in this safe city, this glad city in the temple where God is present, as they meditate on these things, they think, wow, God must love us. Somehow the city and all that happens in the city and the temple in the city, all of that shows them the steadfast love of God. Verse 10, as your name, O God, so your praise reaches to the ends of the earth. Your right hand is filled with righteousness. Now, don't miss that. Your praise reaches to the ends of the earth. Well, wait, in the previous Psalms, we had the nations and all people celebrating the king, and it was starting to sound global. And now we've got God's praise going all the way to the ends of the earth. Verse 11, let Mount Zion be glad. Let the daughters of Judah rejoice because of your judgments. In the Old Testament, daughters of Judah is sometimes like the villages, like the little cities. So let Mount Zion, Jerusalem, and the cities of Israel, let them be glad, rejoice because of what God has done in judgment. So, verse 12. Walk about Zion. Walk about the city. Go around her. Number her towers. Count them. Consider well her ramparts. Go through her citadels, that you may tell the next generation that this is God, our God forever and ever. He will guide us forever. So, back in verse 9, the people were in the temple thinking on God's steadfast love. And now, in verses 12 through 14, they're called to go walk around the city. Go study the city. And if they do that, they will be ready to tell the next generation that this is God. That probably doesn't mean that the city is God, though God's the main point. But it means that this is what God is like. This is the display of who God is. This shows us God and His greatness and His works. Once you've studied this city, you'll know who God is and what God is like and what God does, and you'll be ready to teach your kids about it. And the way you do that is you go study the city. Remember, we said a minute ago that somehow this city is the place where everything we've heard about God is put on grand display. Study the city and you'll say, wow, this is God, our God forever and ever. He will guide us forever. If He's like this, if He's done this, then surely He's going to guide us forever. We are secure. We can rest. We have a refuge. We have a river. We have a joy. Shoot your missiles. Make your AI bioweapons. We're okay. Because look at our city. Okay? There you go. That's Psalms 46 through 48. God and the unshakable city, Psalm 46. Global songs to a global king, Psalm 47. And then Psalm 48, God's city cannot be overthrown. God's praise cannot be contained. All right, what's going on here? That's what I wanted to try to figure out. What's going on? There's such interesting psalms, but how do they fit into the story of the Bible, and how do we apply these things to ourselves? How do we join these songs? So, I couldn't make any sense out of it for my little brain if I didn't get it down on paper, so here you go. This is Pastor Tim's little brain trying to make sense out of Psalms 46 through 48. You could make this chart different ways. There's stuff I left out. It's a very imperfect chart. I'm just trying to help myself understand these psalms. So you see that there are 3 columns for the 3 psalms. You see that? And then there's 7 rows. First row is picture this. All those vivid things we can see in the psalms. Second row, God is. The point of all this is God. So I just wanted to pull out what are the things about who God is. The third row is the nations and peoples. They kept coming up over and over again. So I wanted to kind of pull out those parts and see them together. And then past, present, and future. And this is especially about that city and what God does. So past, that's going to be like original context, like Jerusalem and the nation of Israel, the setting of the Psalms. And then present, in parentheses there I have Jesus. How do these Psalms point us ahead toward Jesus, what He's doing in the world and the church today? And then future, what's the final, ultimate fulfillment of these Psalms? Now, when I go through that past, present, and future section, I know that we're going to start getting into things, some of the things that Christians disagree about the future and Israel and the church and what God's going to do and so forth. And can I just reverently say, in this case, I don't care a whole lot about, I don't think those controversies affect really the impact, the meaning of these Psalms and what they mean for us. So I'm not going to try to get into any of that at all. I'm not trying to make a big eschatology point with this chart. I'm just trying to grasp these Psalms. And then the last row is I can. So these are the statements in the Psalms about us. and how we might respond and join these songs. So let's just go through the chart, one psalm at a time. So start with Psalm 46, and we're just going to go right down that column. Psalm 46, you have all those pictures of the river in the city, which is a fortress. You have dawn when God's there to help, but then you also have the earth falling apart, kingdoms tottering, earth melts, desolations, bows break, spears shatter, chariots burn. Okay, we've got all those pictures. Who is God in Psalm 46? Well, he is his people's refuge, strength, help. He is in the midst of the city. He is with his people. And I just have God there, because in Psalm 46, be still and know that I am God. God is God. And then God is exalted. But what about the nations and peoples in Psalm 46? They rage, then they totter, they're desolated, they're stopped, be still. But then it seems like they also exalt. Somehow the nations end up exalting him. All right, past, present, future in Psalm 46. Well, first of all, in terms of the past, Psalm 46 is about Jerusalem and it being protected. And so you have, lots of people think that there's a particular story in 2 Chronicles chapter 32 when Sennacherib attacked Jerusalem during the time of Hezekiah. They think that's probably maybe the background of Psalm 46 because Isaiah was there at that time. And there are some chapters in Isaiah that sound a lot like Psalm 46. So maybe there's that particular background of a particular attack on Jerusalem and God's protection of the city in the past. If we move ahead, though, to the present in Psalm 46, a huge theme in Psalm 46 is that God is in the midst of the city. God is with us. And so we think of Jesus, Emmanuel, God with us. Psalm 46, you have this river that makes the city glad, and Jesus is the water of life. We think of Jesus describing the Spirit in us as this like fountain bubbling up, this constant source of life-giving refreshment. And through those things, we think then of the church, the place where God dwells today is among his people. The church is the place where the water of life flows freely. So there is a connection there to the church. What about the future? Well, Psalm 46 talks about such massive desolation that I think it has to be pointing ahead to the end of the world as we know it. The earth falls apart. There is desolation. The kingdoms fall. Wars cease because of God's judgment, and somehow God is exalted among all the nations. And so then the Bible talks about earthly Jerusalem and that city in the future, millennial Jerusalem, and it talks about the new Jerusalem with the river of the water of life. And it assures us that there, in that city, God will be in the midst of his people forever. So, we'll get to the last box in just a second, but we can take the themes of Psalm 46 and trace them all the way through, from Israel's history to what God is doing in the church today through Jesus, and all the way to the very end of what God's going to do. It's an epic psalm, the whole of God's salvation story. So how can we respond? We can not fear, not be moved. We can be glad, walk in the Spirit, be refreshed by him every day. We too can be still, not be alone, be safe in God's city. Okay? That's 46. Let's go to the Psalm 47 column now. I'm not going to try to trace the rows across, but once we've done this, you could go back and do that. It's really fun to see all the connections. Psalm 47. All right, what are the pictures there? Peoples, clapping, shouting, singing. It's like this, welcoming the king. You've also got the picture of the nations underfoot, conquered, really ruled by God's people. And then you've got God going up. That's probably the most important picture. You've got his throne. You've got the shields. So who is God in Psalm 47? He is most high, to be feared, king over all the earth. That's so important in all these psalms. Highly exalted. So what do the nations do in Psalm 47? They clap and they shout. and they sing because they fear God. He is awesome to them. And they submit. Because they gather as or with God's people. So they have submitted to the king and they have come to him. All right, so what does all that mean? Past, present, and future. Well, in the past, that points us to God choosing Israel, loving Israel, and then God bringing victories for Israel when they were faithful to his covenant. There were many defeats too, but when they were faithful to his covenant, he brought victories. And it says there, the ark goes up as it is brought to Jerusalem. So that's a very important historical connection to Psalm 47. When Psalm 47 describes God going up with the shout and with the trumpet, it's the exact same Hebrew words as when David brought the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem. So that was, the place where God's presence was manifested, was that ark. And so when that was finally brought into the tabernacle in Jerusalem, it was a huge celebration. God had come to the city. So there's a big connection there in the past. What about in the present? Well, we already mentioned this is an ascension psalm that the church has used to celebrate Christ ascending to heaven. He came down to earth, conquered sin and death and hell, and then ascended back to heaven, highly exalted. And today in the church, nations gather as God's people and praise him. It happened on this, like we mentioned, on this Lord's Day in Ukraine. There were people worshiping just as there are people worshiping here in California today. Jesus has gone up to the throne of God. By the way, bonus points on our homework here, not on our chart, but remember that Jesus also said, when I am lifted up, will draw all men to me. So Jesus was also lifted up on the cross. And through that, drew men to him for salvation. Then, having died, he rose again and was lifted up to the right hand of the throne of God in heaven. Everything in this chart revolves around the cross of Jesus, who saves rebels in every nation and makes them sons in his family and princes in his kingdom. All revolves around Jesus. So, you have that Christ ascending, lifted up on the cross, and then ascending to heaven. In the future, there will be total triumph. Jesus will ascend to full earthly reign. And in conjunction with that, the kings of the earth will gather to worship God. The kingdom of this world will become the kingdom of our God and of his Christ, and he shall reign forever and ever. And so remember how Psalm 47:9 says, the princes gather as the people of the God of Abraham. Revelation 21, describing the New Jerusalem, it says that the kings of the earth will bring their glory into it. And then God's people will rule and will inherit forever. That's Psalm 47:3 and 4. Jesus said, "Fear not, little flock, it's your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom." So there will be total triumph. And I guess you could say the last time when God goes up to his throne, the final time when he establishes ultimate worldwide dominion and all the nations worship forever. So how can we respond? We can clap, shout, sing 6 times in the psalm, fear him, but then also call others to come and worship too. Psalm 47 is almost like an evangelistic psalm. I mean, look at Psalm 47, verse 1. Isn't that an evangelistic verse? Hey, all people, celebrate God the King. Welcome him as King. Clap your hands, shout, sing, come worship, because he's King. You're going to bow before him one way or another. So come, be one of the King's people. It's really a gospel call. And so we're the voices of that call to other people to come and worship today. Okay, let's do the Psalm 48 column. The pictures in Psalm 48, the city, which is also a holy mountain, which is also a citadel, which is also a fortress, And then we've got this attack, the king's coming, but then the king's trembling, the hurricane that wipes them out, and the city's got its towers, its ramparts, its citadels. And then we have the picture of God as our guide forever and ever. Who's God in Psalm 48? He's great. He's to be praised because he's king. He is the fortress. He is terrifying. He terrifies those kings. He is eternal. He's also faithful in love. He's righteous. He's just. And he is his people's guide forever and ever. What do the nations and peoples do in Psalm 48? They assemble against God's city. They attack it. Then they tremble. They flee. And yet somehow they end up rejoicing and praising. How does that all fit together? Well, past, present, future. In the past, Psalm 48 again describes Jerusalem established and then protected by God. In the present, though, we read it in Hebrews chapter 12. Christians are citizens of spiritual Mount Zion. It's what that Hebrews 12 uses that exact phrase for us. We sang, "Mine are keys to Zion's city." Because the way Hebrews 12 describes it, it's like there's this heavenly city and the heavenly Jerusalem, and we're all citizens of it. That's like our real home where we really belong. And so we are part of that holy and joyful city of God today. Jesus said he would build his church and the gates of hell would not prevail against it. So there's that present sense of Psalm 48. Mount Zion is ours. That city is ours in the church today. But that's not the end. The church today is not the end of what God's going to do. Jerusalem seems to still have a future in Bible prophecy, a millennial Jerusalem where Jesus returns and reigns, and then ultimately a new Jerusalem where God dwells with his people forever. So that's what you have there first in the future section, millennial Jerusalem, new Jerusalem. And it's so interesting that Psalm 48 describes kings gathering together and attacking God's city and then being completely terrifyingly defeated and blown away. Because you've got passages in Ezekiel, Joel, Zechariah, Daniel, and Revelation that all describe some kind of assault on God's land, God's city, that results in this final ultimate victory of God against all of his enemies. So Psalm 48 seems to point toward that final attack on God's city that is thwarted. And in the end, what we have is global praise. Global praise. Not just global destruction, but people from every tribe and tongue and nation worshiping the Lamb, just like Revelation describes. So then finally, under that future section, God will be with his people, guiding them forever. So we can praise, rejoice, be loved, and then meditate, consider. And as we meditate and consider, out of that, we worship. And we can then be guided. God, would you lead me? God, I want to follow you. You're the great King. Please let me walk in your Spirit, be led by your Spirit. So, okay, don't miss that ending. Because where do we start the sermon this morning? We started with Psalms that you can see. And where does Psalm 48 end? Walk around the city. Study it. And once you've studied the city, you'll know who God is and what God is like. So what does that mean? It means all that stuff we put in there, past, present, and future on that chart. You study those things, you learn about Jesus is the river of life. You learn that mine are keys to Zion City. You learn about the future triumph of what God's going to do. You learn about how God is our refuge and our help and a very present help in trouble today. You learn about all these things, and you come to the end of it, and you're like, oh, wow, that's what this God is like. So God gives us all these things to see to help us grasp spiritual truths. So these Psalms would call us to okay, I feel like every week I have these dumb little illustrations I use, and you rightfully make fun of me for them, and that's good. I need the humility. Here's another one, though. So as I'm thinking about these Psalms this week, I just keep picturing me in this little city. And I know I'm not in a little city. I'm in a big city. I get it, but I'm just saying, when I'm trying to picture God's refuge, God's strength, God's help for me, my chaos, all that stuff, I've got this little fortress around me. It's God, God's the citadels, God's the towers, God's guarding this little city and God's in it with me. Yeah, you can laugh at me. It's okay. But it helps me, because you guys know I get up in the morning, I take my journal, and about half the time I'm like, I'm overwhelmed. I can't do this. Life is too much chaos. I can't handle this. Stop and picture the city. All right, there's a river flowing right through my life today. How cool is that? You see, God wants us to see if we'll stop and meditate, stop and consider, stop and remember how these things show us His steadfast love. Okay, there you go. I've given you a lot of homework to go home and think about those things more. I know we did a lot today, but we can't finish studying these Psalms, which call us to worship about a dozen different times and tell us to sing 6 different times without singing. So we're actually going to sing 2 songs in conclusion. First of all, we're going to sing A Mighty Fortress is Our God was prompted by Psalm 46, but the text isn't really from Psalm 46 very much. It was just kind of what got Luther started as he wrote this hymn about God's triumph in the chaos of his world. So what we're going to do is we're using the melody of A Mighty Fortress, but we're singing a text that actually works through Psalm 46. So we're singing Psalm 46 to the tune of A Mighty Fortress. But then we studied 3 Psalms today. So after we sing Psalm 46, then we're going to sing There is a Higher Throne, which so marvelously wraps together Psalms 47 and Psalms 48. So using these 2 songs, we're going to kind of like sing our way through Psalms 46 through 48 there.